Good evening. I am your creepy counselor. Welcome to my booth here in the Vale. Our story tonight is brought to us by IndigoCreepy and is simply titled Mannequin. I have now approved your visa and you may continue to the other side, but please remember my advice. At any point, if you feel uneasy, if they notice you, run, and I will open the veil for you again. The bell above the door jingled as Mark, a young man in his 20s, locked up the clothing store for the night. It was his routine to work the late shift and close the store by himself. As he walked through the aisles, turning off lights and straightening hangers, an unsettling feeling washed over him. He couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, even though he was alone. After finishing his tasks, Mark headed to the break room to grab his jacket. As back into the store, his heart skipped a beat. A mannequin that had previously stood in the corner of the room facing the entrance of the store was now positioned directly in the middle of the aisle, turned around 180 degrees, facing Mark in the break room. Cold sweat trickled down Mark's forehead as he questioned his own memory. Had he really missed that mannequin before, directly in the middle of the aisle? Shaking off the unnerving incident, Mark locked up the store and went home for the night. But the next morning when he arrived to open up, he was greeted by a scene that froze him dead in his tracks. All of the mannequins in the store had shifted positions overnight. They were all huddled together in a circle, as if whispering secrets to each other. Mark quickly snapped a photo of the bizarre scene with his phone, determined to show his boss and demand an explanation. But when he approached his boss, Mr. Johnson, with the evidence, he was met with dismissive laughter. "Mark, those mannequins are just objects," Mr. Johnson said, waving his hand in the air. "It's your imagination running wild. Don't let it get the best of you. Focus on your work." Doubt gnawed at Mark's mind, but he reluctantly accepted his boss's explanation. Maybe he was overacting. Perhaps it was all a figment of his imagination, amplified by the late hours and eerie atmosphere of the store. However, the unsettling events only intensified as the days passed. Mark began to notice subtle changes each morning when he arrived. Mannequins would be in different positions or even swap between different sections of the store. One night, as Mark was closing up the store, a sense of foreboding engulfed him. The lights flickered, and each time they came back on, the mannequins were closer to him than they were previously, their lifeless eyes fixated on him. Panic surged through his veins as he fumbled with the keys, desperately trying to escape their unyielding gaze. The lights started to flicker in longer intervals and then abruptly cut completely for what felt like an eternity, plunging the store into prolonged darkness. Mark's heart raced as he stood frozen, his breath shallow and quick. The silence was shattered by a sudden metallic scrape, followed by the sound of dozens of footsteps. In the dim moonlight filtering through the windows, Mark saw silhouettes of the mannequins sprinting directly towards him while convulsing and twitching. Terror paralyzed him, as he started hearing the sound of laughter echoing through the store and getting closer and closer to him. Finally, the power surged back on, illuminating the store once more. Mark found himself surrounded, encircled by the mannequins. Their blank faces had now painted on malicious grins. Their cold hands reached out, fingertips almost reaching him. The lights cut out one final time that night. When Mr. Johnson arrived the next morning to open up for the day, he was greeted by an eerie sight. Confusion creased Mr. Johnson's face as he stepped behind the register. There, seated on the stool, was a mannequin, dressed in the store's employee uniform.